I started a series called The Power of One. Want to continue that series today. You can call this part 2, The Power of One. Before I move forward, our new members, people, if you are here, if you please stand. Our new members ministry, persons in our new members ministry, there they are. There they are there. I want you to look at them. If you're here today, and if in the midst of this worship experience or at the end of the sermon today, if the Lord moves you, I'm asking you, pick one of them out right now. Go to them at the end of the service. If God moves you to join us here, these are the persons you need to talk to. And so pick one of them out right now. And at the end of the service, don't shake hands, don't hug, don't admire clothes. You go to one of them and let them tell you about what it means, one, to be saved, and then two, what it means to be a part of the Elm Grove family. And if you're here today and you're in need of prayer, these three, along with others, will be willing to pray with you after service. Thank you all very kindly. The Power of One, Part 2. If you notice, our passage of scripture was taken from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, to be specific. It is interesting, sisters and brothers, that scholars believe that Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon, David's son, wrote the book of Ecclesiastes at an older age, after he'd been seasoned by life. Scholars believe, sisters and brothers, that he only wrote this particular book, if you will, after he had been visited by God, as it is recorded in 1 Kings chapter 11. It is there that God confronts Solomon in an old age, if you will, and not only does he confront him, but he convicts Solomon. He suggests to Solomon, I've been good to you all of your life, and yet, Solomon, you have rebelled against me. You remember Solomon never met a woman that he didn't try to get with. You remember Solomon followed other gods, practiced idolatry, even though he had God on his side. And so God confronts Solomon and says to him, I've been good to you all of this time, and now I need to let you know I don't appreciate the way you've been handling me, Solomon. And perhaps, sisters and brothers, some of us in here know something about living in a state of rebellion. Solomon was rebelling against the God who covered him and protected him and blessed him and caused him to prosper. And it is after this confrontation, if you will, that Solomon begins to give us these words of wisdom. I bring the matter to your attention because I want to warn you, baby, that you don't have to wait until you get old, and you don't have to wait until God confronts you about idolatrous ways before you turn yourself around, give your life to the Lord again, and allow him to use you to pour into other people. I think it's a pity and a shame that Solomon had to find himself in a messed up situation before he began to minister to people, to even us today. Not only so, sisters and brothers, you will recall that one of the major themes of this book of Ecclesiastes, according to Solomon, is that nothing ever changes. Solomon wrote to us and said that nothing ever changes, and it bless me, sisters and brothers, when I recognize that Solomon was a part of the privileged or the elite crowd. And since Solomon was privileged and Solomon was a part of the elite crowd, certainly he didn't want anything to change. It was all good, all gravy for Solomon in the natural, if you will. The money was flowing in. He had everything he wanted in the natural. So Solomon wrote for people to read, nothing is going to change. I think the same message is a part of the socio-economic, political, public relations machine of those who sit in seats of power today. Their message to you and I is nothing is going to change. After all, if you were sitting on top, if everything was going your way, you would want things to stay the same too. But what about the masses, sisters and brothers? What about those of us who know what it is to try to find the ends to make them meet? What about those of us who struggle to find the boots to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. And you trying to tell me that nothing is going to change every time you turn on the local news, every time you watch the national news, read the local newspapers, every time you click the mouse, and read your favorite news site on the internet. The message is nothing is going to change. That's why every day they keep pouring into us bad news after bad news after bad news, trying to get it into our consciousness that nothing is going to change. It trips me out when you really think about it. The messages that they give us, is nothing is going to change. They try to make us believe that our children will forever supply the pipeline to the prison industrial complex. Nothing is going to change. Try to make us believe, that the image of black womanhood, can be found on jacked up reality TV shows or in sex tapes with shower rods. Nothing is going to change. Trying to make us believe that our people will always have to try to numb themselves from the pain in this life with all kind of chemicals that are doing more damage than they are doing good. Nothing is going to change. You're not feeling that one? Well, they try to send you the message. Nothing is going to change. You're never going to get your joy back again. Nothing is going to change. You're always going to have to pay for this medicine that makes the pharmaceutical executives rich. Nothing is going to change. Trying to convince you that your trouble is going to last always. But that's not what God said. God says change is possible. God said weeping may endure for a night, but comes in the morning. That's what God said. God said your latter house shall be greater than your former house. That's not what God said. God said to you, baby, if you hold on, he said your beginning may be small, but your end will increase abundantly. That's not what God said. I don't know who Solomon was talking to, but Solomon is not talking to me. God can and God will change your situation. He says in the next verse, he says, now one can get attacked and the attacker will prevail or overcome. But if two stand together in agreement, in obedience to God, then they will overcome the attacker. I think my eyes are open now. I think I see something. I see now why there are so many people who wear an S like they're a saint, but they really little devils. Because they're connected to the wrong people. They connected to people who come into their lives to talk against what God has said about them. Connected to the wrong people who come in and when pastor delivers the word, they come in swooping in like Jesus describes and tries to take that word from their heart. Connected to the wrong people who hate everything and everybody, who don't want anything for themselves and they don't want you to have anything. The wrong people who lie just as sure as they look at you. The wrong people that you can't trust as far as you can throw them. The wrong people who will tell you what they think you want to hear so they can get what they want from you and then kick you to the curb like you never existed. The wrong people. But the word says that if you're connected to the right one and you put aside your differences and you're living in unity with one another, that when the attack comes, I love it because it does not suggest that you will necessarily have an attack, but it can happen. Somebody needs to hear that. It does not necessarily mean that you need to walk around with your guards up ready to fight everybody, but it can happen. I think somebody in here will testify to you that that the attacks may not be may not come one after the other. Although we do have seasons where it seems like there's one thing after another, but sometimes there are lulls in your season, and you walking around all tensed up, ready to fight, wearing yourself out, and God is trying to give you a season of peace. It does not mean that it will necessarily happen, but it can happen. Somebody say it can happen. Yes, some of us sisters and brothers have know something about the attack. Some of us have been attacked by temptation. You know, that thing that looks so good, smells so good, sounds so good to you that it's hard to turn away. You know that temptation that as much as you talk about, you're gonna put it out of your mind. It just keeps popping right back up. You know that temptation that says that says to you, let's just go on and get this over with so we can move on to the next thing. Let's just do it one more time. When you discover that one more time turns into another time that turns into another thing. You know that temptation that says, look, nobody's looking, so let's just go on. It's just you and me. You know that temptation that says, well, it's dark, everybody else is asleep, so let's just go on and do what we got to do. You know that temptation that says, if I put it in my pocket, nobody will see it, and I'll pull it out when I'm alone so that I can do what I need to do. You know that temptation, don't you? Temptation that makes you look at your brother and sister with a weary eye, with a wiry eye, that makes you say, yeah, that makes you look like you on their side, but you're really not on their side. You know that kind of temptation attack all of us. But there's another attack, and Paul describes it in the book of Ephesians. He says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against principalities and powers and rulers of the darkness of this world, with spiritual wickedness in high places. And I'm sure I'm preaching to some people who know something about being attacked by the powers that be, attacked by principalities, those who sit in seats of power, attacked, sisters and brothers, by the rulers of the darkness of this world, attacked, sisters and brothers, attacked by those who would just assume tear you down as they would build you up. But Paul says that if you can get somebody to agree with you, may not be your mama, but if you can get somebody to join with it, may not be your best friend, but if you can get somebody to join with you who knows the power of prayer, somebody to join with you that knows that God will hear them if they cry, somebody to join with you that ain't scared of the devil, somebody to join with you that's not intimidated by the anointing on your life, if you can get somebody to join with you that's going where you going and want to do what you want to do, if you can get somebody to join with you that decides, come hell or high water, we coming out of this thing, if you can get somebody to join with you, he says the attack might come, but two can stand back to back.